For thousands of years, one lost object has haunted the imagination of believers, historians, and treasure hunters alike. It is said to have held the very presence of God, to have shattered armies, to have killed those who touched it carelessly, and then to have vanished without a trace. This is the story of the Ark of the Covenant, part sacred relic, part lethal mystery, and one of the most enduring enigmas on Earth. Imagine a vast desert night. The sky is clear, the stars burn like cold fire, and in the middle of that emptiness, a group of people march in silence. At their center, carried on poles over the shoulders of priests, there is a chest made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. On its lid, two golden cherubim face each other, wings outstretched, forming a kind of throne. No one is allowed to touch it directly. No one dares to look at it for too long. When the ark moves, the people move. When the ark stops, they stop. Their fate is tied to whatever is inside that shining box. In the flickering light of oil lamps and campfires, the ark becomes the fixed point in a wandering world. Families pitch their tents in great circles around it, always keeping a respectful distance. Children are warned not to run too close to the sacred enclosure. Soldiers sharpen their spears by starlight, but glance again and again toward the place where the ark rests, as if drawing courage from something they cannot see but deeply feel. The earliest descriptions of the ark are found in the Hebrew Bible, in the books of Exodus, Numbers, Joshua, and Samuel. According to the narrative, the ark was built at the command of God Himself. It was to be the container of the tablets of the law, the stone tablets on which the 10 Commandments were written. But it was more than a container. It was a meeting point between heaven and earth, a portable throne where the divine presence, the Shekinah, would appear in a cloud or in flashes of fire. The instructions for building it were precise. The box had to be 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 wide, and 1.5 high, roughly 1.10 meters by 66 centimeters by 66 centimeters. It had to be covered entirely with gold, inside and out. The carrying poles were never to be removed from the rings, as if the ark had to be ready to move at any moment. Around it there were further layers of holiness, a curtained enclosure, a sacred tent, an entire camp laid out according to tribe and rank. It was not simply holy, it was dangerous. Approaching it without authorization meant death. When the Israelites camped in the wilderness, the ark was placed inside a sacred tent called the Tabernacle, separated from everyone else by curtains and veils. Only the high priest could enter the inner chamber where it stood, and even he could only do it once a year, on the Day of Atonement, after purification rituals and sacrifices. He would wash, dress in specific garments, and carry blood from the altar in a basin. Smoke from incense would fill the room, partly to symbolize prayers rising to heaven, partly to hide the blinding glory said to rest above the ark. Outside, the people would wait in tense silence, watching the curtains ripple in the hot wind. If the high priest emerged alive, it meant the rituals had been accepted for another year. If he did not, there was no backup plan. That is how seriously the ark was taken. It was the center of their world, but it was also something they feared. The ark, however, was not always stationary. The stories describe it moving ahead of the people like a supernatural vanguard. When they crossed the Jordan River to enter the Promised Land, the priests carrying the ark stepped into the water first. The river stopped flowing, piling up in a heap upstream, and the people walked across on dry ground. Later, when they faced the fortified city of Jericho, they marched around its walls for 7 days. Each day, the ark was carried in silence while trumpets sounded. On the 7th day, according to the text, the walls collapsed. For generations, these passages have raised questions. Was the ark witnessing miracles or somehow causing them? Was it simply a symbol of faith, or was there something else at work, something physical, powerful, and poorly understood? Ancient stories speak of people struck dead for touching it, of strange plagues breaking out among those who captured it, and of an invisible force that seemed to radiate from its golden surfaces. To believers, these events are the direct action of God, the inevitable consequence of approaching what is holy with disrespect. To skeptics and researchers, they sound like clues. A box of wood lined with gold, carried by insulated poles. Sudden deaths, tumors, and illnesses near it. Light, fire, and storms described when it was active. Some have wondered if the Ark might have been, in part, a forgotten piece of technology, one that could store or channel electric charge, or even emit some form of radiation. We do not know. What we have are fragments, ancient texts, religious traditions, speculative theories, and a mystery that refuses to die. Before we can follow the Ark into lost temples, distant mountains, and hidden chapels, we need to understand the path it took through history, and the moment it simply disappeared.
The first time the Ark is described as a weapon is in the turbulent era of conquest and tribal war. After the people settled in the land, the Ark was kept at a sanctuary in a place called Shiloh. It was the spiritual heart of the young nation, guarded by priests and visited by pilgrims who brought sacrifices and prayers. Songs were sung there, disputes judged, vows made. But according to the book of Samuel, faith decayed, corruption spread among the priestly family, and enemies gathered at the borders. When the Philistines, a powerful seafaring people armed with iron, threatened them, the Israelites made a desperate decision. If God's presence was tied to the Ark, then perhaps taking the Ark into battle would guarantee victory. It did not. The story says the Ark was carried into the battlefield at Aphek, accompanied by shouts so loud that the ground shook. For a moment, fear gripped the Philistine ranks. The enemy soldiers whispered that the God who had crushed Egypt was now in the camp of Israel. Then the battle turned. The Israelite army collapsed, and the Ark was captured. The unthinkable had happened. The sacred chest, symbol of the covenant itself, was now in enemy hands. From here, the narrative changes tone. In the Philistine cities, strange events begin to unfold. Wherever the Ark is placed, misfortune follows. In one city after another, people develop painful swellings. Panic spreads. There are reports of rodents overrunning grain stores. Statues of the Philistines' own god, Dagon, are found fallen on their faces before the Ark, their stone hands and heads broken off. Priests and rulers argue about what to do. Is this a coincidence, a run of bad luck, or proof that the captured object is dangerously alive? Terrified, the Philistine rulers decide that the object is too dangerous to keep. They place it on a cart pulled by 2 cows that have never been yoked, and separate the animals from their calves, creating every reason for them to turn back. Instead, the cows walk straight into Israelite territory, lowing as they go, without any human driver, as if drawn by an invisible command. The Ark returns, but something has changed. It is no longer simply a symbol of victory, it has become a riddle. Those who celebrate too carelessly are struck down. Others are killed for merely looking at it. The text describes 70 men dying in a single incident. Fear and awe mix together. People begin to ask not just, how can this save us, but who can safely stand near this? It is as if the Ark is drawing a line that no one fully understands, a boundary between reverence and recklessness. Eventually, the Ark is taken to the house of a man named Abinadab on a hill and left there for years. It is almost as if the people do not know what to do with it anymore. They want the blessing, but they fear the cost. Villagers pass by at a distance. Travelers point to the house on the hill and tell stories in hushed tones. The Ark waits in silence, hovering between sacred relic and forbidden object. It is only when a new king rises, David, the warrior poet, that the Ark returns to the center of the story. David decides that the political capital of his kingdom, Jerusalem, must also become its spiritual center. The Ark, still resting in Abinadab's house, has to be brought up to the new city. The procession that follows is described as one of the most joyous scenes in the Bible. Musicians playing harps, lyres, and tambourines, people dancing in the streets, the king himself leaping with abandon in front of the ark as it moves toward the city walls. Then, disaster strikes again. The ark is placed on a cart, drawn by oxen. At one point, the animals stumble, and the cart tilts. A man named Uzzah reaches out instinctively to steady the ark with his hand. In that moment, he drops dead. There is no time for last words, no warning, just a collapse in the dust beside the cart. The celebration stops. The music falls silent. The story says that David is both angry and afraid. If the ark can kill a man for trying to keep it from falling, who can possibly be safe? The king halts the journey and diverts the ark to the house of a man named Obed-Edom. There it stays for 3 months. When reports come that Obed-Edom's household is being blessed, his flocks flourishing, his vineyards heavy with fruit, his family thriving, David gathers his courage. This time the procession is more careful, more reverent. Sacrifices are made along the way, and the ark is carried on the shoulders of priests rather than bumped along on a cart. Finally, with shouts and trumpets, the ark is brought into Jerusalem and placed in a tent prepared for it. The city has a new, invisible occupant, one that brings both power and danger, protection and fear.
With the ark now in Jerusalem, a new phase begins. David dreams of building a permanent house for it, a temple not of cloth and wooden poles, but of stone and cedar, shining with gold. He gathers materials, draws plans, and sings about his longing in psalms. But he does not live to see the project completed. That task falls to his son, Solomon, a king famed for wisdom and for grand building projects. According to the narrative, Solomon's temple is raised on a hilltop platform, its inner courtyards rising layer upon layer until they culminate in a dark inner chamber, the Holy of Holies. That chamber has only one purpose: to hold the Ark of the Covenant. On the day of the temple's dedication, the Ark is carried up the hill with great ceremony. Priests blow trumpets, sacrifices burn on the altars. The king stands before the people in royal robes. The streets are crowded, the air thick with smoke and anticipation. When the Ark is placed behind the curtain in the inner room, something dramatic is said to happen. A cloud fills the temple, so dense that the priests cannot continue their service. They stagger back, overwhelmed, while Solomon declares that the divine presence has taken up residence there, in the shadowed space between the golden cherubim on the ark's lid. For centuries afterward, this moment is remembered as the height of the nation's story, the time when heaven and earth seemed closest. From that point on, the ark almost disappears from the written record, at least as an active character. It is there, assumed, resting in the darkness at the heart of the temple. Pilgrims come and go, bringing animals for sacrifice, grain for offerings, and questions for the priests. Kings rise and fall. Some lead the people toward justice and faithfulness. Others slip into cruelty, idolatry, and corruption. Prophets stand in the courtyards and cry out warnings, comparing the temple to a den of robbers or a house built on sand. Through all this, the ark waits in silence behind the veil, its golden surfaces unseen. Occasionally, it glimmers into view in the texts. A verse in Chronicles mentions that the Levites are to minister before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. Another passage describes a reforming king, Josiah, ordering that the ark be returned to the temple after years of neglect. The references are brief, almost casual, as if the writers assume that everyone already knows where the ark is and what it represents. There is no hint yet that it will soon vanish. Then the storm breaks. Far to the east, an empire rises, Babylon, under kings like Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar. They crush Assyria, expand westward, and eventually reach the small kingdom that centers on Jerusalem. After a series of rebellions and sieges, the Babylonian army surrounds the city. The walls are battered, the defenses fail, and in 586 BCE, the temple itself is set on fire. Its treasures are looted and carried away as war plunder. The people are marched off into exile along dusty roads, looking back at the column of smoke that marks the end of an era. In the official Babylonian records and in the biblical books of Kings and Jeremiah, there are lists of the items taken from the temple: gold basins, silver bowls, lampstands, utensils, and other objects. Scribes recorded weights and numbers with cold precision, as conquerors always do. One object, however, is never mentioned. There is no clear statement that the Ark of the Covenant was taken. There is also no clear statement that it was destroyed. After standing at the center of the narrative for so long, the Ark simply vanishes from the story. This silence has fueled centuries of speculation. Did the priests hide the Ark in a secret chamber beneath the temple before the Babylonians breached the city? Was it smuggled out earlier, during one of the political periods of chaos, perhaps under the cover of religious reform? Was it dismantled, its gold stripped, its wooden core burned, the remains scattered so thoroughly that no legend even remembered to record the act? Or was it carried away to Babylon and later lost or melted down, its identity forgotten among countless other treasures? Later Jewish writings, like the Book of Maccabees and various rabbinic traditions, hint at another possibility: that a prophet or priest, foreseeing the coming disaster, took the Ark and concealed it somewhere else entirely, perhaps in a cave in the mountains or in some unreachable wilderness. In those accounts, the hiding place is often sealed until the time of restoration, a vague future moment when the people are spiritually ready and the Ark can safely return. What is certain is this: when a new temple is eventually built in Jerusalem after the return from exile, there is no longer any Ark in its inner chamber. The second temple has an empty Holy of Holies. The high priest still enters once a year, but there is no golden chest, no cherubim, no visible throne. The absence is itself a presence, a wordless reminder that something vital is missing. From that point on, the Ark of the Covenant belongs more to memory and legend than to verifiable history. And that is where the search for it truly begins.
Once the Ark slips into silence, imagination rushes in to fill the void. Across centuries and continents, clues are gathered, stories are woven, and new destinations appear on the map. If the Ark did not die in the flames of the temple, then where did it go? Three of the most enduring trails lead to Ethiopia, to hidden chambers beneath Jerusalem, and to the shadowy world of medieval knights and secret orders. The Ethiopic tradition is one of the most detailed and passionately defended. According to the Kebra Nagast, a medieval text that blends history, legend, and theology, the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon in Jerusalem and later bore him a son named Menelik. When Menelik became an adult, he traveled to meet his father. On his journey back to Africa, the story says, the Ark of the Covenant was taken from the temple and carried with him, either by divine command or by a daring act of theft that Solomon himself ultimately accepted as God's will. In some versions, the Ark is replaced by a replica so perfect that no one in Jerusalem notices the loss until it is too late. In others, heavenly beings themselves guide the journey. The Ark then travels south, crossing deserts and highlands until it reaches the kingdom that would become Ethiopia. There, it becomes the core of a new sacred geography. Kings ruled by the law of the Ark, claiming their legitimacy from its presence. Battles are won with it paraded ahead of the army. Festivals revolve around it, Even when political power shifts and dynasties fall, the belief remains that the Ark once arrived, never left Ethiopian soil. Today, in the city of Axum, there is a small chapel attached to the Church of St. Mary of Zion. The Ethiopic Orthodox Church teaches that the original Ark rests inside that chapel, guarded by a single monk who never leaves its grounds. No one else is allowed to see the object. Even visiting patriarchs and foreign dignitaries are turned away. During religious festivals, a covered replica is carried through the streets, but the true Ark, if it is there at all, remains sealed away. Supporters of the tradition point to the deep roots of Judaism in ancient Ethiopia, the presence of tabots, miniature arks used in churches, and the unwavering conviction of the local clergy. Skeptics note the lack of physical evidence and the impossibility of independent verification. The mystery remains intact. A second trail keeps the Ark much closer to its last known home. Some Jewish and Christian traditions hold that shortly before the Babylonian invasion, priests hid the Ark somewhere within or beneath the Temple Mount. There are stories of Jeremiah the prophet concealing it in a cave on the nearby Mount Nebo, and of secret tunnels leading to chambers carved into bedrock. Over the centuries, various excavations, both official and illegal, have tried to probe the foundations of the mount. None have produced a golden chest, but they have revealed a labyrinth of cisterns, passageways, and sealed rooms that hint at how easy it would be to hide something and to keep it hidden for millennia. The Temple Mount, however, is one of the most sensitive and contested religious sites on earth. Each stone is layered with meaning for Jews, Muslims, and Christians. Major excavations beneath it are politically and spiritually explosive. As a result, if the Ark is indeed buried somewhere under its stones, it may be safer and more realistic to assume that no one will be allowed to find it. The most compelling evidence for this theory may be the absence of any serious attempt to test it. The third great trail leads into the forests and fortresses of medieval Europe. During the time of the Crusades, groups like the Knights Templar established headquarters on or near the Temple Mount. Later legends claim that while they were there, they discovered secret tunnels and recovered lost treasures, including, some say, the Ark of the Covenant itself. From there, the stories branch wildly. In some versions, the Ark is carried to hidden vaults in France or Scotland, guarded by a line of sworn protectors. In others, it is linked to later mysteries, from mountain chapels to secluded islands where treasure hunters still dig. Historians are quick to point out that solid evidence for these claims is very thin. Much of it emerges centuries after the Templars were disbanded and persecuted, when their name had already become a magnet for conspiracy theories. Documents are forged, symbols are overinterpreted, and tourist sites spring up around supposed hiding places. And yet, the idea is irresistibly cinematic. Armored riders discovering an ancient relic beneath Jerusalem and spiriting it away under cover of night, leaving clues scattered in architecture, heraldry, and coded manuscripts. Beneath these three major traditions lie countless smaller ones, local legends of caves that glow with unearthly light, of monasteries with forbidden rooms, of nomadic tribes guarding secrets handed down from father to son. In remote villages, storytellers still point toward distant mountains and whisper that the Ark sleeps there, wrapped in cloth of gold and watched by angels. The Ark's silence has become a canvas, and each culture paints its own answer on it.
As the possible locations multiply, another question rises from underneath them all. What exactly was the Ark? If someone were to open a hidden chamber tomorrow and find a gold-covered chest with carrying poles and cherubim, what would they actually be looking at? A divine throne? A dangerous machine? A brilliant symbol that once held a nation together? To religious believers, the answer is straightforward and profound. The Ark is the physical sign of a covenant between God and a people, a reminder that the divine presence is not an abstraction, but something that once moved through history in a concrete way. In this view, the miracles associated with the Ark, the parted waters, the collapsing walls, the deadly holiness, are not side effects of unknown technology, but the direct result of a holiness that human minds cannot safely measure. The Ark is unique because the God behind it is unique. Others, however, have tried to read the ancient descriptions through the lens of physics, engineering, and medicine. They notice that the Ark's design, with a wooden core overlaid inside and out with metal, resembles a kind of capacitor, a device that can store electrical energy. They point out that those who touched it without preparation sometimes drop dead, as if struck by a powerful discharge. They note the talk of tumors, plagues, and strange illnesses in the surrounding population, and wonder about radiation, pathogens, or toxic substances concentrated in or near the Ark's resting place. Some researchers have speculated that the Ark could have been part of a larger set of ritual technologies, perhaps involving naturally occurring radioactivity, electrostatic charge, or even chemical reactions that were dimly understood but carefully controlled by a priestly elite. In that scenario, the strict rules about who could approach and how they had to prepare would not just be religious regulations, but also safety protocols encoded in theology. The Ark would then sit at the blurred boundary between science and magic, operating according to laws of nature that were interpreted as acts of heaven. Still others see the Ark less as a machine and more as a psychological and political force. Carrying the Ark into battle, for example, could focus a people's courage and identity. Losing it could shatter morale and call an entire belief system into question. Stories of its lethal power would serve as a warning against sacrilege and as a way to reinforce the authority of priests and kings. In this reading, the true power of the Ark lies not in lightning or radiation, but in belief, in what people are willing to do or not do because they think the Ark is near. There is also the question of what might happen if the Ark were definitively found and authenticated today. Would it unify or divide? Would it spark renewed faith or bitter conflict over who has the right to possess it? Some theologians suggest that the Ark's continued absence is itself a kind of mercy, that an object so charged with significance might be too volatile for a fractured world to handle. The truth may lie somewhere in the overlap between these views. An object can be both symbol and tool, both sacred and dangerous. It can shape events not only through what it physically does, but through what it makes people feel. A single artifact placed at the center of a people's story and changed the course of wars, laws, and lives. And yet, even if we could explain every effect the Ark ever had, one part of the mystery would remain untouched: its disappearance. Objects that important usually leave clear trails. They are cataloged, taxed, fought over, displayed, inherited. The Ark does none of these things. After centuries in the spotlight, it steps into the shadows and never comes back out. Perhaps it really is resting in a hidden chapel in Axum, guarded by a solitary monk. Perhaps it sleeps under tons of stone inside the Temple Mount, sealed away until some future age. Perhaps it was destroyed long ago, its gold melted, its wood turned to ash, its story surviving while its body vanished. Or perhaps, and this is the most unsettling possibility of all, it is somewhere we have not even thought to look, in a place that does not match any legend. In the end, the Ark of the Covenant occupies a strange space between history and myth. It begins in detailed instructions and dated events, then dissolves into rumor and silence.
It inspires prayer and fear, scholarship and obsession. People cross deserts and risk political backlash just to get a little closer to the possibility of it. The fact that we do not know where it is has not diminished its power. If anything, the uncertainty has made it stronger. When we speak of the Ark, we are also speaking about our hunger for connection with something beyond ourselves, something that can bridge the distance between Earth and whatever might be above it. Whether the Ark is still out there or has long since returned to dust, its story continues to travel. It moves from camp to camp, from language to language, from one generation's questions to the next. Somewhere, behind walls of stone or inside the human imagination, the golden chest still waits in the dark, and we, restless and curious, keep searching for it.